For months, I had been parking my car in the same spot, right in front of my house, where everyone else parked. It wasn't a big deal. There was plenty of room, and the street was wide enough to accommodate everyone. I thought nothing of it honestly, but then came Karin, the self appointed neighborhood watchdog. She had been lurking in the background, keeping an eye on everyone's coming and going. It wasn't long before she decided my choice of parking spot wasn't to her liking. At first, it was little things, passive aggressive nods slipped under my door, complaining about improved parking and how it disturbed the peace of neighborhood. The funniest part, my spot was literally no different than anyone else. I tried to brush it off first. After all, who take parking complaints seriously, right? But then Karin started ramping it up, leaving more and more notes. Same even include ways reference to the HOA's rule that I couldn't find anywhere in the actual guidelines. It was as if she was making up her own rule just to have something to complain about. Every time I parked the same spot, I could feel her eyes on me. It was like she was waiting for me to slip up so she could pounce, and sure enough, one day and finally got her chance. One afternoon, I was heading out to grab some groceries when I saw her car in standing at the end of my driveway, arms crossed, looking at like she was about to lecture me on life choices. At first, I thought maybe she needed something, but as soon as I stepped out of the door, she wasted no time. Hey, need to talk about your parking, she said, her voice sharp and cutting. There was no greeting, no small talk, just pure unfiltered complaint. I stood there, momentally stunned. I didn't know what I had done wrong with this time. But Karin wasn't about to let that side. You have been parking in that spot for weeks, and it's causing issue for the neighborhood. You are blocking driveways. You are taking too much of space, and it's against the HOA guidelines. He said, practically spitting out the last part. I couldn't help but laugh nervously. Karen, I'm parking in front of my house. It's not blocking anyone. It's just regular parking spot. She wasn't having it. No, 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 no. It is not just a regular spot. It's a problem, and you are making it worse by being inconsiderate. Her eyes narrowed, and I could feel the tension building it in the air. It was like she was on a mission to turn this into a bigger issue than ever needed to be. I don't think the HOA rules was about where I can park the car in. Karin, I said, trying to keep things calm, but she wasn't listening. Instead, she shook her head and said, "You just wait. If you don't move, you're going to regret it. I will make sure of that." And just like that, I knew it wasn't going to be end there. And Karin had drawn her line and in the sand, and she wasn't going to stop until she had gotten her way. I thought Karin's rant was just another one of her random overblown complaint, and that she would let it go. But boy, was wrong. The next morning, I woke to a message from neighborhood. Hey, I think your car have been towed. I did a double take, towed my car. I rushed outside, half awake, only to find that my car was indeed gone. I stood there looking up and down the street, hoping it had just been moved to the another spot, but no, the space where I would have always parked was now empty. In a panic, I checked the towing company's number that was printed on the notice left on my door. It was the same one listed on the signs near the end of the street. The one Karin had probably seen 100 times. My stomach dropped as I called the company. Yup, we have got your car here. And the tow truck driver said, sounding way too casual, car in from the HOA called it in. She said your car was in a violations. In violation of what? I asked, now completely confused. I had received any ticket of warning. I had no idea what rule I supposedly breaking. Well, she didn't go into the detail, but she said it was an issue with your parking space, he replied. I couldn't believe there was a no violation, no warning, just Karen pulling the trigger without asking anyone of following any protocol. I was furious, but now I had to figure out how to get back my car. As I raced toward the tow yard, my mind was racing. I couldn't stop thinking about how absurd this whole thing was. But then it hit me. Why had I parked in particular spot in the first place? See, I wasn't just parking there because it was the easiest or the closest spot to my house. My car had been acting up for a while. The transmission was slipping and the brakes weren't responsive as they should have been. I didn't want to risk driving it too far, especially in case something happened. So I parked it right there because it was safe place, close to the driveway with a minimum traffic and spot that would let me keep an eye on the car while I figured out what to do. Karin had no idea about any of that, and to her, it was just another spot for her to take control over. She didn't care about the reason behind my decision, just that I wasn't parking where she thought I should be. But now, with my car being towed and my frustrations boiling over, it felt even more personal. Not only was I being targeted for something that wasn't breaking any rule, but also being punished for situations Karin didn't even take time to understand. I need to get to the tow yard, get my car, and figured out my next move. But as I dropped there, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to be a much bigger headache than I ever anticipated. I arrived at the tow yard, and to be honest, it was bracing for the worst. The place had a gritty industrial vibe, concrete lot, chain fence, a few other cars lined up waiting to be picked up. It wasn't exactly the most welcoming place and wasn't thrilled to be there, especially under these circumstances. I approached the office window and the clerk looked at me like I was just another annoyed customer. Name? He asked. Flatty. I said, try to keep my cool. After a few minutes of typing, he handed me the paper and pointed to where my car was parked. I couldn't help but feel my frustration rising as I walked over, and when I finally saw it, I froze. There it was, my car sitting there on a lot, but there was something off. There was a deep scratch running along the side of vehicle. It wasn't there when I parked it. I was sure of it. The tow truck driver had clearly scrapped it while moving the car, and now I had to deal with the damage on the top of anything else. I walked over to the tow truck driver who was standing near chatting with a coworker. Hey, what happened to my car? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady but feeling. The driver looked at the scratch, shrugged, and said, oh, I'm sorry, man. Didn't notice it until I was pulling on the flatbed. We will note it down, but that's what happens sometimes with these tours. I couldn't believe it. Not only had Karin gotten my car towed for no reason, but now it had scratched that wasn't my fault. I had to fight back. But as I stood there trying to process everything, I realized these situations wasn't just about the tow, it was about how Karen had completely overstepped her bonds, and she didn't care about my car, my reasons for parking there, or damage the car being done. It's just all over the control. Just when I thought these situations couldn't get on my ridiculous, it took an even strange turns. As I was talking to the tow truck driver about the scratch, something else caught my attention. Sorry, the driver had started to lift the car from the tow yard flatbed to move it back to into the solid ground, and that's where he did something that changed everything. He paused mid-lift and looked at me with a confusion expression. Hey, you have got the emergency brake on, he said, pointing toward the parking brake lever. I blinked. What? No way. But sure enough, I walked over to the car and checked the emergency brake was still fully engaged. It hadn't been released when the car was stored, which the emergency brake was still fully engaged. It okay, which explained a lot of trouble. The The tow truck had been pulled, trying to pull it on the flat where the car had been harder to move than it should have been. In fact, the only reason that the tow driver had been struggled was because of that brake, and they didn't even notice until it was too late. The driver chuckled and shook his head. Well, that explain a lot. I'm sorry about the scratch, but if I had known the brake was on, it would have been a lot different story. I stood there for a second, processing the fact that I had literally been taught for something as simple as forgetting to release the emergency brake. Karen had been just overacting to my parking spot. She had been completely obvious to the real reason my car wasn't moving. And now, thanks to her need to enforce her so called rules, I was dealing with the damage that could have been easily avoided. It was the final straw. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was determined to get more justice there. Karen had to be held accountable for her actions. Now that I had all the pieces, the towing mishap, the damage to my car, and the fact that the Karen had no real authority to making these decisions, I knew it was the time to act. I wasn't just going to let this side. I went straight to the HO office, paperwork in hand, ready to confront them about everything. When I walked in, the managers behind the desk looked up to me and instantly seemed uncomfortable. So I didn't waste my time. I need to talk to someone about the towing incident, I said, placing the towing notice and repair estimate on the desk. Karen from HOA took it upon herself to have my car towed for parking in an area wasn't even a problem. The managers glanced at the paper, then back at me. We didn't authorize the tow, but Karin is a very active in enforcing neighboring rule. Active is putting it mildly, and I snapped. She didn't check with anyone, didn't even know that my car was parked there. And now it's damaged. She's out of control. I spent the next hour explaining everything what happened, and from the first complaint to the tow and the discovery about the emergency brake. The more I talked, the more it became clear. Karen had been acting well beyond the scope of what the HCA was meant to regulate. And the worst, HOA had been backed by its rule. Everything Karen did was on her own, without approval or support from everyone else. At the end of the meeting, the HOA manager reluctantly admitted that they had been given Karen the authority to the ground, calling it towing companies, and they promised they would investigate the situations and get back to me. A few days later, they contacted me with the good news that you had been agreed to cover the towing fees and the repair cost for the scratch. But that wasn't all, and they had issued a new rule of new required for towing request to go through the board for approval rather than letting a single person decide. And as for the car ANC, officially reprimanded for her actions, and that she made it clear that she wouldn't be able to matters in her own hands like that. It felt like a small victory, but it's a small win.